Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it like a scheduling update, not a boundary. No intimacy until after the holidays. Too tired, too much going on, too many expectations. She said it while scrolling on her phone, thumb moving, eyes not lifting. I nodded once, because nodding costs nothing. I said nothing else, because silence is cheaper than arguments and lasts longer. By the time she noticed I felt far away, I was already gone. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 41. I work in cybersecurity. I design systems that assume failure is inevitable and plan around it. Redundancy, isolation, quiet monitoring. I don't raise alarms unless I'm sure. That habit doesn't turn off when I get home. The house was decorated for December. Boxes from Costco stacked near the pantry, receipts folded into her planner, holiday efficiency without warmth. We moved through the same rooms without touching, like two well-tested processes running on separate threads. She talked about deadlines at the lifestyle brand she marketed for. Launches, influencers, end-of-year metrics. Her voice was energetic. Practiced. She didn't notice I'd stopped asking questions. The first morning after that conversation, I left early. Stopped at Dunkin' and drank the coffee in my truck, engine idling, watching my breath fog the windshield. The Chevy Silverado sat heavy and patient under me, like it always had. I wasn't going anywhere. I just needed space where nothing asked me for anything. When I came back that night, she was already on the couch, wrapped in a throw, Hulu glowing across her face. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge that had been crooked for years. Didn't tell her. She didn't hear the screwdriver over the TV. This wasn't punishment. It was alignment. If intimacy was off the table, then so was access. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I adjusted. I started eating breakfast alone, lunch at my desk, dinner when she was already halfway through an episode. My phone stayed on silent. Not to hide anything. To stop reaching. On the third night, I noticed something small. Her phone buzzed, and she smiled without realizing it. Not a wide smile. Just a soft one, reflexive. The kind you don't fake. She turned the screen away without thinking. Years of trust do that. They teach you which movements don't need explanation. I logged it. Not emotionally. Systemically. By day 4, she stood in the doorway of my office and asked why I felt so far away. I looked past her at the wall, at nothing in particular, and realized the distance wasn't something I created. I just stopped filling it. The shift wasn't dramatic. That's what made it effective. I didn't withdraw all at once. I reduced surface area. Less eye contact. Shorter responses. Neutral tone. I treated the marriage the way I'd treat a compromised system I wasn't ready to shut down yet. Monitor first. Change nothing externally. Let the anomaly reveal itself. She filled the silence with noise. Notifications. Podcasts. Background television. Hulu ran late into the night while I worked in the garage, fixing things that didn't need fixing. A loose railing. A door that stuck only when humidity changed. I went to Lowe's twice that week and came back with parts we'd lived without for years. I didn't tell her where I was going. She didn't ask. We still shared the bed. That was the strange part. Same mattress, same sheets, same routines, minus the warmth. No accidental brushes. No reaching in the dark. I slept on the edge, facing away, breathing slow and even. I made sure of that. Stillness is convincing when practiced long enough. On the 5th morning, she stood in the kitchen holding a mug she hadn't sipped from, watching me eat. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes, because technically it was. My calendar was clean. My work was stable. My heart rate stayed low. That's what okay looks like when you're trained to notice systems, not feelings. What she didn't know was that I'd started noticing time instead of words. Gaps. Delays. Patterns. Her phone never buzzed when I was in the room. It lit up when I stepped away. She showered longer. Dressed nicer for errands that used to take 10 minutes. She came home with the energy of someone who'd been listened to. One night, she laughed at something on her screen and then caught herself, glancing toward the hallway like she'd forgotten I was home. The laugh didn't fade. It tightened. She muted the phone and turned the screen down. I didn't move. Not reacting is a skill you learn early when you work with threats that escalate, if acknowledged. I started keeping my phone face down. Silent. Not to mirror her. To remove variables. Distance works best when it's consistent. By the end of the week, she tried to close it. Asked if I was upset about the holidays. About intimacy. About stress. She stood close enough that I could smell her shampoo. I stepped back half a pace, just enough to reset the space between us, and told her she should get some rest. She looked confused. Off balance. Like she'd misjudged the room. That night, I stayed up late, not working, not thinking, just listening to the house. Systems hum when they're under strain. You can hear it if you know what to listen for. By the second week, the house adjusted to the new temperature. That's what happens when heat is removed slowly. Pipes don't burst. Walls don't crack. Everything just cools until the cold feels normal. We went to Costco together on Saturday because it was already on the calendar. Holiday prep. A joint task with no intimacy required. We pushed the cart down wide aisles, shoulders never touching, conversation limited to logistics. Paper towels. A tray of something seasonal she wouldn't finish. She walked half a step ahead of me, the way people do when they're already mentally somewhere else. I watched her instead of engaging. The way she checked her phone between aisles. The way her posture softened when she read something, then straightened when she noticed me looking. She put the phone face down in the cart, then turned it back over a minute later. Small movements. Unconscious ones. Those are the only ones that matter. On the drive home, she filled the silence with talk about a listing that had just closed. Not hers. His. Mark Reynolds. Our friend. The one who'd helped us buy the house. The one who knew the quirks of the neighborhood, the neighbors' names, the code to the garage keypad, because we'd given it to him years ago and never changed it. She said he'd stopped by the office that week. Said he was stressed. Said he'd listened. Listened is a loaded word when used that way. I didn't react. I kept my eyes on the road. The truck rolled steady, suspension barely noticing the speed bumps. When you don't respond, people keep talking. They fill the space with tells. That night, she stayed up late on the couch. Hulu played something light and forgettable. I went into the other room and shut the door. Not hard. Just enough to change the acoustics. Distance isn't dramatic. It's architectural. I checked nothing. No messages. No locations. No feeds. Monitoring too early alerts the threat. I knew that. Instead, I paid attention to behavior. She smiled more. She touched her hair when her phone buzzed. She stopped mentioning my name when she talked about her day, like I was already a background process. Around midnight, I walked past the living room and caught the glow of her phone reflected in the window. She was scrolling Facebook Marketplace, not shopping, just moving her thumb like she needed motion to calm something underneath. She looked up too late. The screen went dark. She asked if I was coming to bed. I said I had work to finish. That wasn't a lie. I was finishing something, just not on a screen. When she finally slept, I lay awake and accepted what the system was telling me. Trust hadn't failed all at once. It had been rerouted, quietly, through someone who had always been inside the perimeter. I didn't need proof. Proof is what people ask for when they still plan to confront. I wasn't there anymore. I was in containment. The distance did something to her. It unsettled her rhythm. She started watching me instead of her phone. Not openly. In reflections. In pauses. In the way she'd stop talking mid-sentence like she was checking whether I was still reachable. I made myself predictable. That's important. Same wake-up time. Same departure. Same neutral tone. I stopped explaining where I was going. Explanation invites negotiation. I wasn't negotiating anything. One evening I came back from Lowe's with a box of hinges and weather stripping. I fixed the back door that whistled when the wind cut just right. She hovered in the kitchen, pretending to clean, asking casual questions about my day. I answered with short, complete sentences. No hooks. No warmth. Just information. She told me Mark had stopped by earlier. Dropped off some mail that had been misdelivered. She said his name too quickly, like it was already rehearsed. She added details that weren't needed. He'd only stayed a minute. He'd been in the area. He'd said hello. People over-explain when they feel observed. I thanked her for telling me. That was it. Gratitude without curiosity is disarming. She stood there a moment longer, like she was waiting for the other shoe. There wasn't one. That night, she stayed up later than usual. Hulu murmured through the walls. I didn't watch. I lay on the bed, phone face down, listening to the cadence of her steps. She paced when she thought. She always had. 3 steps. Pause. 3 more. Then stillness. When she finally came to bed, she turned toward me. Hesitated. Her hand almost touched my arm. Almost as where most people live. I shifted just enough that her fingers met air. Not rejection. Misalignment. She didn't try again. The next morning, she asked if I was mad. I said no. And I meant it. Anger requires engagement. I had already disengaged. By the fourth day of this version of us, she asked why I felt so far away again. This time there was strain in her voice. Not accusation. Fear. Distance is tolerable when you believe it's temporary. It becomes dangerous when it feels permanent. I looked at her and realized something clean and undeniable. She hadn't noticed my silence when it started. She'd noticed it when it stopped serving her. I told her I was just tired. Which was true. Systems don't sleep. They just wait. That afternoon, she scrolled Facebook Marketplace for hours, not buying anything, just searching. For what? I didn't know. People look for replacements before they admit something is gone. I watched none of it directly. I didn't have to. By the middle of the third week, the house stopped pretending we were fine. She began inventing reasons to cross my path. Folding laundry that didn't need folding. Standing too close in the hallway. Asking questions she already knew the answers to. Distance had stopped being abstract for her. It had weight now. It took up space. I stayed consistent. That's what makes silence unbearable. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't reassure. It doesn't punish. It just remains. I left early most mornings, same as before, stopping at Dunkin' and drinking the coffee alone in the truck. No music. No scrolling. Just the sound of the engine and the heat working its way through the cab. I didn't feel sad. I felt focused. There's a difference people mistake all the time. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Not to catch anything. Timing shifts reveal more than confrontation ever could. The house smelled like a candle she only lit when guests came over. The kind she claimed helped her relax. She was in the shower. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, face down, vibrating once, then again, then stopping. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she startled when she saw me. Not guilt. Surprise. The kind that comes from misaligned expectations. She asked when I'd gotten home. I answered calmly. She nodded too many times. That evening, she suggested we go through holiday plans together. A reset, she called it. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't commit. Plans require shared futures. I wasn't allocating resources to that yet. Later, she settled into the couch and turned on Hulu, volume lower than usual. She kept glancing toward the hallway, waiting to feel me join her. I didn't. I went into the garage and reorganized shelves that were already organized. Physical systems respond when emotional ones don't. Around midnight, she wandered in and leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me work. She asked if I still loved her. I took a breath before answering. Not because I was unsure. Because precision matters. I told her I hadn't changed. Which was true. I had just stopped compensating. That answer unsettled her more than anger ever could have. The next day, she spent hours on Facebook Marketplace again, scrolling without purpose, thumb moving like she was trying to outrun a thought. She looked up when I passed and asked if I was thinking of leaving. I said nothing. Not avoidance. Refusal to speculate. That night, she cried quietly in the bedroom while I lay awake, listening to the structure of the house hold us apart. By then I knew. Not because I'd seen anything. Because the system was behaving exactly as expected when trust had been redirected and silence had stopped being safe. I didn't need confirmation. I needed patience. Patience changes the power balance. Once she realized silence wasn't a phase, she started testing it. Small bids. Casual touches that landed just short of connection. Questions framed like concern instead of control. She wanted reassurance without confession. Continuity without accountability. I didn't give her either. I kept my routines intact. Morning coffee alone. Work. Evenings spent fixing things that had waited years for attention. One night, it was a light fixture. Another, a drawer that never closed right. I made another late stop at Lowe's and came home with screws I didn't urgently need. Staying busy is different from being occupied. One is avoidance. The other is preparation. She began narrating her days more loudly, like volume could replace intimacy. She mentioned Mark again, casually, saying he'd helped a client nearby and stopped by to drop off a holiday card. She placed it on the counter like evidence. I glanced at it, thanked her, and went back to what I was doing. The lack of reaction landed harder than suspicion ever could have. That night, she didn't turn on Hulu. She sat in the living room with the TV dark, phone in her hand, not scrolling this time. Just staring. When I passed through to grab a glass of water, she asked if we were okay. The words came out flat. No accusation. No anger. Just uncertainty. I told her I was fine. That was the truth. My system had stabilized. I slept better. Ate better. Thought clearly. Removing emotional noise has that effect. What she didn't know was that I'd stopped seeing her as my primary input. I wasn't angry enough to confront, and I wasn't desperate enough to cling. I was observing the lag between her actions and her explanations. The delays. The contradictions. The way her stories required effort to maintain. On Friday, we went to Costco again. Another mechanical errand. Another shared task with no shared presence. She lingered longer than necessary, trailing behind me, watching instead of walking ahead. When we loaded the car, she stood close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm. I didn't move away. I didn't lean in. Neutrality is harder to interpret than rejection. That night, she tried to initiate closeness. Not physically, emotionally. She talked about stress, about feeling unseen, about needing connection during the holidays. She spoke carefully, like someone negotiating terms without naming the breach. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I nodded once and said she should get some rest. She stared at me like she was waiting for a response that never came. Later, alone in the dark, I understood something important. Silence had done what confrontation never could. It had forced her to sit with the gap between who she thought she was and what she'd actually chosen. And gaps don't stay empty forever. The moment didn't arrive with drama. It never does when you're paying attention. It came on a Tuesday, quiet and ordinary, the kind of day people later swear felt different even though it didn't. I left early, same as always, stopped at Dunkin' out of habit, not comfort. Sat in the truck a few minutes longer than usual, watching condensation creep across the windshield, thinking about how systems fail when someone inside them stops following protocol. When I came home that afternoon, the house felt occupied in a way it hadn't all week. Not loud, just altered. The air carried a different weight, like furniture had been moved and put back slightly wrong. Subtle, but noticeable if you knew the original layout. She was in the kitchen, too composed, energy dialed up just a notch past normal. She told me Mark had stopped by again. Needed to grab a folder he'd left months ago. She said it casually, like she'd rehearsed neutrality. Said he hadn't stayed long. Said it wasn't a big deal. She was right about one thing. It wasn't. The back door was unlocked. That door is always locked. Not out of fear. Out of habit. I'd replaced the latch myself years earlier. Muscle memory doesn't forget that. I didn't mention it. I washed my hands, poured a glass of water, and listened to her talk around the edges of something she wasn't naming. Her voice had a softness I hadn't heard in weeks. Not toward me. In general. Like someone who'd already exhaled. Later, while she showered, I noticed a second towel missing from the rack. Not gone. Just damp, folded wrong, placed back with care. People try to erase evidence when they still believe discovery is the danger. They don't realize distance already is. That night, she watched Hulu alone again, volume low, glancing down the hallway like she expected me to appear. I didn't. I was in the garage, reorganizing a shelf I'd reorganized twice already. Purpose wasn't the point. Presence was. She came out eventually, stood near the doorway, and asked if I wanted to sit with her. Not watch together. Just sit. I told her I was fine where I was. Which was true. When she went back inside, her phone buzzed. Once. Then again. She muted it quickly this time. Too quickly. I lay awake later, not angry, not hurt, just clear. The pattern had resolved. The anomaly wasn't a glitch. It was a reroute. I didn't feel betrayed in the way people describe. That requires shock. What I felt was confirmation. And confirmation doesn't demand action. It demands precision. After confirmation comes cleanup. Not hers. Mine. I didn't change my behavior outwardly. That would have broken the illusion she still clung to. The one where distance could be negotiated back into warmth if she just found the right angle. Instead, I tightened internally. Reduced exposure. Minimized dependency. Quiet exits don't start with suitcases. They start with detachment. I stopped sharing my schedule. Stopped updating her on work. When she asked when I'd be home, I said later. Not evasive. Accurate enough. Later can mean many things. She started hovering again. Standing too close. Touching my arm when she passed. These weren't gestures of desire. They were checks. Pings sent into a system to see if anything responded. Nothing did. One evening, she suggested a Costco run together, like routine could resurrect connection. I agreed, because refusing would have created friction she wasn't ready to feel. We moved through the store in parallel, not together. She lingered. I didn't slow. At checkout, she reached for my hand. I adjusted my grip on the card instead. No drama, just absence. On the drive home, she stared out the window, quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. She was doing math, estimating loss. People always do that too late. That night, she didn't turn on Hulu. She sat on the couch with her phone, scrolling Facebook Marketplace again, eyes glassy, thumb moving without intention, searching for something unnamed. Replacement furniture for a life she could feel shifting under her. I went to the garage and worked until midnight. The shelf was already perfect. I made it better anyway. When I came inside, she asked if we could talk. The request was careful, like she knew pressure would break something fragile. I told her I was tired. Not dismissive. True. She followed me down the hall and asked if I was pulling away on purpose. I paused long enough for the question to hang between us. Then I told her I wasn't pulling away. I'd just stopped reaching. That landed harder than anything else I could have said. The next morning, she woke up early and watched me get ready. Not casually, intently, like she was trying to memorize something. She asked if I loved her again. I didn't answer right away. Silence is honest when words would lie. I said love isn't the same thing as presence. She nodded like she understood. She didn't. By then, my decision was complete. Not impulsive. Not angry. Clean. I stayed in the house. Slept in the same bed. Ate at the same table. But I was already gone. And she could feel it. That's when panic started to replace confidence. That's when she began to realize the gift I'd given her wasn't distance. It was finality. Panic makes people careless. She started waking up before me, hovering while I got dressed, offering help that wasn't needed. Coffee already made. Questions already loaded. She watched my face the way people do when they're afraid of missing a signal. I gave her none. That afternoon, she cleaned the house aggressively, like order could reverse entropy. She rearranged things that had been fine for years. When systems destabilize, people reach for control anywhere they can get it. I came home to silence thick enough to feel. No Hulu. No background noise. Just her sitting at the table, hands folded, posture too straight. She didn't accuse. She didn't deny. She asked if I was leaving her. I took a moment before answering. Not for effect. For accuracy. I told her I hadn't left. I just stopped participating in something that no longer included me. That's when she broke. Not theatrically. No shouting. Just a quiet unraveling. She admitted she'd felt lonely. Unseen. Understood somewhere else. She said Mark had listened. She said it hadn't meant anything at first. She said she hadn't planned it. People always say that last part like it matters. She waited for anger. For questions. For permission to justify. I gave her none. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Intimacy redirected is still intimacy lost. The mechanics don't change the outcome. She cried. Apologized. Promised to fix it. Promised to cut contact. Promised things that only make sense when you believe time can be reversed. I told her it wasn't about punishment. Or forgiveness. Or even betrayal. It was about alignment. She'd chosen proximity elsewhere. I'd adjusted accordingly. That night, she slept curled toward me, trying to reclaim warmth through closeness. I lay still, eyes open, feeling nothing but resolve. You can't be held back into presence. The next morning, I stopped at Dunkin' again, same as always. Drank the coffee in the truck, engine steady, watching people rush into lives they still believed were stable. I wasn't running. I was concluding. When I came home, she was scrolling Facebook Marketplace, eyes red, looking at apartments she couldn't afford yet. Contingency planning always comes late. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't announce anything. Quiet exits don't require movement. They require finality. She asked what we were going to do. I told her I was done pretending proximity equaled partnership. That was the moment she understood the distance wasn't a phase. It was the end, and there was nothing left for her to negotiate. The end didn't arrive with suitcases or slammed doors. It came the way real conclusions do. Quiet. Decided. Irreversible. I stayed in the house for another week. Not out of confusion. Out of clarity. I moved through rooms without friction, without explanation, without urgency. She watched me like someone observing a stranger who still wore a familiar face. She tried once more to restore the illusion. Cooked dinner. Set the table carefully. Talked about memories like they were leverage. I listened. I thanked her. I ate. Ritual without meaning is still just motion. I spent one last evening at Lowe's, buying supplies for a project I'd already decided not to finish. I stood in the aisle longer than necessary, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to remember the feeling of choosing nothing. Control isn't always about action. Sometimes it's about restraint. When I came home, she asked if I was leaving that night. I told her no. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath underwater. People confuse presence with hope. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and cataloged what I felt. No rage, no grief, no desire to win, just closure. Clean and final, like shutting down a system that had already failed its integrity check. On the last morning, I woke before her. Made coffee. Didn't drink it. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a moment, watching her sleep, noticing how far away she already was even then. Distance doesn't start when someone leaves. It starts when someone chooses elsewhere. I left a note on the counter. Not an explanation. Just logistics. Timing. Boundaries. Precision matters. When I pulled out of the driveway, the truck moved slow and steady, tires rolling over concrete that had never known urgency. I didn't look back. Not because I was strong. Because there was nothing left behind that belonged to me. Weeks later, I heard she told people I'd changed. That I'd become distant. That the holidays had been hard on both of us. Narratives are easier than accountability. I didn't correct her. I rebuilt my days around silence that wasn't empty anymore. Morning routines without tension. Evenings without second-guessing. A life where presence was no longer rationed. Some people fight betrayal loud. They demand explanations. Closure. Justice. I didn't. I gave her exactly what she asked for. Distance. And I kept the rest for myself. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.